Welcome back, Ceramics 1. This is the video for making a stencil. In class I call it the tape resist, but I'm going to show you other ways to do it as well. The basic concept is that you're going to put something onto your finished work so that you're making an area that doesn't have a piece of glaze or a piece of underglaze. So in a previous video making this example, I did what's called a paper stencil. So I'm just going to review that quickly before we move on to tape resist, because tape resist is basically the same thing except you're doing it with tape. I feel like cutting out paper is a little bit easier than using tape, but you can choose either method you'd like. Okay, so for paper, you're basically just going to cut out the shapes or lines or designs that you'd like. You get a brush and some fresh water, and you're going to just get your paper stencil that you've cut out a little bit damp. You're going to moisten the clay so that it shouldn't be greenware yet, and it shouldn't be too wet. It should be about leather hard. And you just take that paper, and after it's wet and the clay is wet, the two will stick together nicely. If they don't stick right away, you just add some more water to it, smooth it down so that all the wrinkles get flattened, and then you're ready to go. All right, once that paper is flattened out, you can simply go back with the color. So here are my underglaze colors, and I'm just going to grab this light pinkish color here and paint right over the top. Let's say I paint right over this circle with kind of another circle. Okay, and we're going to let this dry while I do the next part of the demonstration, and we'll come back to this. All right, so this paper stencil, you can make a complicated variety of things, attach them all to the clay, and then paint over the top of it and have your clay have that stencil design on there. Now for the difference between the two, this piece of clay is called bisqueware. It's been fired once, and this color has already been stenciled on with the paper stencil idea. So the benefit of that is you can take a wet sponge. Let's say I make a mistake, I can wipe over this, and the color stays there because it's already been fired with that color on. So you can have one part of your work be permanent, and the other part you can, have a little bit more flexible. But these stencil designs, you can do the same exact idea with tape. So I'm just going to use some masking tape, and in the room you can grab the masking tape for this part of the design. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this tape. I'm going to show you three different ways of doing this. Step one, you can take the tape and simply tape out the area that you want to remain the original clay color. So I'm going to make a little triangle, like an upside down triangle compared to these other ones, which have the point facing up. I'm just going to tape around the area here where I want that triangle to be. Okay, and I am going to paint this triangular shape in, and we can call this like the negative shape, because that triangle is the hole. That's the negative shape painting. Okay, so you tape off the area you want, and you take your underglaze, paint over that area, and let it dry. Okay, so we'll come back to that a little bit in a minute. The second way you can do this is you can take your tape and you can cut out the shape that you want. This is the positive way of doing it. So I'm going to take this tape, I'm going to cut out a triangle. So there's my triangle that I've cut out, and I'm going to tape it right down here. And now I can paint over the top of that triangle. And what that's going to do is it's going to give me the positive shape of the triangle will be the original clay color, whereas the background of the clay will be painted. Okay, so I'm going to paint a triangle over the top of this with this light whitish pink color. like so. Okay, so there we go. I've painted over that piece of tape now. And the last way that you can use this method is you can take your piece of tape, fasten it onto your clay, smooth it down really well. And when I'm smoothing the tape down, I even like to use the back of my thumb or fingernail to really smush that tape on. And remember, this only works with burnished clay. If I tried to do this up here where this clay is still kind of rough and scraggly, it's not going to stick very well. So you really want to make sure that you're using a burnished piece of your work. That's why I said in the other videos you need to have one section that's nicely burnished. Okay? Once you get that tape secured on, then you can come back with an X-Acto knife and cut away the shape that you want to remove. And again, this is kind of going back to that first version of the the negative method, where I'm actually removing this triangle from the inside, and then I'm going to paint that negative shape, leaving just the triangle. Okay, so there's my triangle that I cut out of the tape. And then same as before, you would paint over the tape and leave that triangle as having the color on it. Okay? Now, we'll come back to the idea here. So here's that original paper template that I had on there. Now if I pull that template off, the paper template, you can see there's that empty spot where the paper was. If it goes underneath the paper a little bit, luckily it's still wet enough that I can just scratch that off with a tool, clean up the edges, and have a pretty nice design left over. Okay, now when I fire this, that line will be nice and crisp and clean. So one of the nice benefits of having a stencil is you can get nice, crisp, straight, clean edges. Whereas when you're just painting with your hand freestyle, it's hard to get those crisp, nice edges. So coming back to our designs here, likewise, just with the paper template that I just did, now that we've got this tape, I can pull this tape off here, and you can see what remains is the underglaze where I've taken that tape off. Okay, and again here is that triangle piece of tape that I painted over, and I can take that off and have that empty shape being the raw clay and paint it around it. And here is the big piece of tape that I used the X-Acto knife to cut out over, and if I just remove that, you can see as I remove that, I've got that nice triangle sitting there. Okay, so with this method, you can, make single colors. I could even overlap colors, like right here. You can kind of see from one of my previous demonstrations with my classes today. I had taped over this and painted some blue on the inside and left the red on the outside. So you can, overlap colors. And if you want to use just a regular dunking glaze, like the pottery glazes, this one has had the tape resist done, dunked in the luster glaze, and then this part here is just raw, unglazed clay. So the way to do that, if I just take this leftover old tea bowl, you would do the same idea. You would take your tape, you would tape it on here, and secure it really nicely on. So there's like my tape that's on there. I'm not going to do a great job on the pattern for this one, but there you go, there's that taping. Then you would go over to the glaze buckets on the other side of the room. I brought one over here so I didn't have to walk over there. You would take your glaze, you would tape up your entire pot so it's all ready to be dunked with all your designs that you have. You would stir up your glaze really well, grab your glaze tongs, and dunk it in for your 3 seconds or 1.5 in 2 different glazes. and you would pull that out and let it dry. And then you remove that tape just like you would. It still needs a second to dry. So you can do that and remove that tape, and I'll remove it in a second. But kids always ask me, well, Mr. Lundgren, if I do that tape resist idea with the dunk glaze, can I go back and do like a second layer? Well, the thing is with dunking glazes like that, they're really dry. They're actually just dust once the water absorbs. So if you try to put tape on top of there, it just doesn't stick at all because it just picks up all the dust and falls off. So you can really only do one layer. If you wanted to, you could go back with a brush and like paint in these empty raw spaces, but it's really time consuming and I haven't seen high quality results with that method. So I wouldn't recommend it. You could do that, but I wouldn't recommend it. All right, now that this one is dry, you know, you would go about the same method. You would just take this piece of tape, peel it off, and it leaves that glaze, empty glaze line there. Okay, so that's another method if you just want to use the dunking glaze. So, in conclusion here, you want to use either the underglaze and clear glaze over the top of it, and use that underglaze to make your stenciled pattern, or if you want to do it with the paper stencil, you can use paper, but it has to, your clay still has to be clay in between leather hard and greenware. For the tape resist, you use a piece of bisqueware, and you can use the underglazes, or if you want to use just the dunk glazes, you can do that too, but you can really only do one layer, so it's not as versatile and you can't get as much detailed results. Okay, so that's your demonstration on tape resist, paper stencils, and glazing. Thanks for joining me.